The fire was unlike anything Jason Miller had ever seen. It tore through the old neighborhood with a hunger that seemed almost alive, devouring houses and trees alike, turning everything in its path into ash and ruin. The night sky glowed an eerie orange, and the air was thick with smoke, making it hard to breathe even through his mask. Jason and his team from Station 21 had been on call for over 12 hours, exhaustion weighing heavy on their shoulders. But the call that came through dispatch jolted them into action. Unit 21, urgent, reports of a child trapped inside 184 Willow Lane. Structure is unstable, evacuate immediately. Jason's gut clenched. "We gotta move!" he shouted to his partner, Eddie Reyes, as they raced toward the crumbling house. The house groaned under the weight of the flames, its frame collapsing inward, windows exploding outward like gunshots. Jason pushed through the smoke-filled entryway, his flashlight slicing through the darkness. "Fire department!" he called, his voice muffled by the roar of the fire. "Is anyone here?" Then he heard it, a soft, trembling voice coming from somewhere deep inside. "Help! Please!" Jason's heart lurched. Without hesitation, he pushed forward, weaving through the crumbling hallways until he spotted her. A little girl, no older than 7, curled up in the corner of what had once been a bedroom. Her blonde hair was streaked with soot, and she clutched a small, singed doll in her arms. Her wide blue eyes locked onto him, full of fear. Jason dropped to his knees, reaching out. "I got you, sweetheart. Come on, let's get out of here." The girl didn't move at first. She just looked at him, then smiled softly, whispering, "Thank you for saving me." Jason scooped her up into his arms, feeling how impossibly light she was, and ran back toward the exit. The flames chased them, the heat unbearable, but just as they reached the front porch, the house groaned one final time and collapsed behind them. He stumbled onto the lawn, his team rushing to help him as he set the girl down gently. "She's okay," Jason gasped, pulling off his mask and brushing her hair back. "She's all right." The girl smiled again, holding out her doll. Jason blinked. "What's your name?" But before she could answer, paramedics swept in and rushed her toward an ambulance. Jason sat on the curb, chest heaving, watching as the girl disappeared into the flashing lights. Relief flooded his system. He'd done it. He'd saved her. But hours later, everything changed. At the hospital, Jason and Eddie were waiting for an update when the attending nurse approached, frowning. "You guys said you brought in a little girl from the fire?" she asked. Jason nodded, feeling the exhaustion finally catching up with him. "Yeah, she's okay, right?" The nurse's expression darkened. "There were no children brought in tonight." Jason's stomach dropped. "What? No, that's impossible. I carried her out myself." The nurse shook her head. "I'm sorry, but there were no child rescues recorded. The only residents in the house were an elderly couple, and they didn't make it." Jason's hands started to shake. "No, I saw her. She thanked me." Eddie put a hand on his shoulder. "Jay, you've been running on fumes, man. Maybe it was the smoke messing with you." Jason felt his chest tighten. He could still feel her weight in his arms, still hear her voice. She was real. But as he looked around, he realized no one else believed him. Unable to shake the feeling, Jason went home that night, but couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the rescue in his mind over and over. Had it really happened? Was it all in his head? The next morning, a notification on his phone jolted him upright. It was an article from a local news archive, an old missing person report. Jason's breath caught in his throat. Staring back at him from the screen was the girl he had rescued. Same blonde hair, same blue eyes, same doll in her arms. The report was dated 5 years ago. Her name was Emily Lawson, and she had gone missing from the same house after a fire. Jason's hands trembled as he scrolled down. The report confirmed it. The house had burned down before. They had never found her body. Later that day, Jason climbed into his truck, gripping the steering wheel tightly. His mind was racing. He had to tell someone. He had to prove he wasn't crazy. But as he reached for the ignition, something caught his eye in the passenger seat. A small, burnt doll. The same doll Emily had been holding. Jason's breath came in short, ragged gasps as he slowly reached out and picked it up. The fabric was scorched, the stitching fragile. His mind reeled. He had never brought anything back from the scene. A whisper drifted through the cabin, so soft it barely registered. "Thank you for saving me." Jason whipped around, but the truck was empty. Shaken, he sat there in silence, clutching the doll like a lifeline, realizing the truth. He hadn't saved her, not in the way he thought. Emily had been lost long ago, but that night, she'd finally been found. Back at the fire station, Jason placed the doll on his locker shelf, a quiet tribute to the girl he couldn't forget. Eddie walked in, noticing the doll. "Hey, where'd you get that?" Jason smiled faintly, his fingers grazing the singed fabric. "A thank you?" Eddie frowned but didn't press the issue. As he left, Jason stared at the doll, whispering, "You're safe now, Emily." And for the first time in days, the weight in his chest felt a little lighter. Some fires never go out, some souls never leave, and sometimes the ones we save were never really there to begin with.